because it takes a while to fire up. Let's get things going on this side. Don't mind me looking up to the side. Okay, we've got that happening there, which is fantastic. And I think we might almost be really live. Let's just check the page as well. Facebook page. Scrolling down. Oh, it takes a while to get live. I'll say good evening in a moment, folks. Doing some tech for the first time tonight. First time I've had a crack at using the streaming thing to multiple pages. And we are hopefully almost there, if I scroll down far enough. Nearly. Bear with me. Okay, so good evening. It is great to see you. Welcome to hopefully the Society on YouTube, on Facebook group, on our Facebook page. No Insta tonight, that was just a bridge too far. And it is great to be with you and talking to you tonight. My name is Andrew Derbidge. I'm the chairman of the Society here in Australia, whiskey manager and cellarmaster, one of the directors, long-standing brand ambassador. And tonight I'm just Matt Bailey's humble fill-in. Matt couldn't host tonight. He's actually got another hosting gig. We're doing a few private hosting gigs that are, I guess you'd say, online in these interesting times. And so I've stepped in to do tonight. And basically what I thought we'd do tonight is go through a couple of things. Obviously it's the night before Outturn. We've got a huge launch tomorrow with all the festival bottlings and everything else that's in Outturn. And I don't intend tonight to rehash anything that Matt's done in the weeks leading up. That'd be a bit silly. He's already covered that in detail. So what I do want to do is actually focus on the distillery, and in doing so, talk about two bottlings that are on our new Outturn and go from there. Now, please send in your comments, send in your questions. If I'm honest, the only thing I can actually get a feed on at the moment is our Facebook group. So if you want to send comments, the group would be a good thing to use. When I jump across to the page, which I'm doing right now off to the side. Oh, there we go. The page is working too. And there's some good comments there. Okay, so I'm going to keep scrolling there. So, folks, I hope you've read this. It arrived in my mailbox just a day or two ago, and this is obviously a big bumper issue. We've fattened up a bit, almost getting to the size of the big newsletters and almost periodical magazines we used to produce 5, 6, 7 years ago. There's a lot going on there. And it's great to have some feature pieces and some feature articles and that as well, which we used to do a lot of back in the day. And some wonderful writing there. And in addition to all that, of course, it's just a bumper crop of bottlings. There is some seriously good stuff in here, and it is the festival bottlings as well. So, and that's what I'm going to feature and talk about tonight in one aspect, but it really is a cracking read. And I know there's a bit of trepidation about tomorrow, the big jump onto the website at 12 noon. It is always a rush and a race, and I'll apologise now if our website doesn't quite handle the rush, but hopefully things will manage. Couple of comments coming in. Gerald, all hail, good to see you, mate. Darren Howie, Zeno, Drew, beg to know, good to see you, Drew. And if I jump across onto the other little page here, Morsey, good to see you as well. So don't mind me if I look off to the side there, that's where I'm going to pick up the comments. So listen, there are two bottlings in this Outturn, and they're festival bottlings. And they're to do with the Islay Festival, which is also better known as Spashila. And the Society has had quite a presence at the Islay Festival in the last couple of years. And we're now bottling casks specifically for the various festivals. And so tonight, what I wanted to do was actually go through, taste, drink, and give you my thoughts on two of the festival bottlings that come from Islay. And in particular, they're both Oh, let's try that the other way. They're both from distillery number 10. I'm going to go through those in just a moment. Now, some of you may have seen the chat, the live stream that Matt Bailey and I did a week or two ago, and we made a promise to ourselves not to mention the distillery names, because that is the society ethos. That's the handshake agreement we have, that we don't put the name of the distilleries on the bottles and we don't give away their identity. So tonight I'm going to do my very best to describe these wonderful bottlings coming from distillery number 10. Now, what I also wanted to do tonight was talk about a distillery that I like called Bunnahabhain. I quite like Bunnahabhain. It's on Islay, and I thought I'd just chat to you about it and also give you some insight into the history of the society and the history of that distillery, and also a couple of things that make the society and the distillery, that particular distillery, great bed partners. And we've done some wonderful things over the years. Now, depending on when you got into whiskey and the branding that was around at the time, you might be very familiar with this bottle here. This is what Bunnahabhain used to look like for a long time, from the almost the late 80s, early 90s onwards, up till about the mid 2000s. And it's had a change in labels since then. But that was certainly what the bottle looked like when I first got into whiskey in the late 90s. And Bunnahabhain always had this wonderful reputation. Now, again, if you come into whiskey recently, you're probably used to the fact that all the distilleries on Islay make peated whiskey now. Now, when I first got into whiskey in the 90s, that was not the case. In fact, if you looked at the textbook and the rule book at the time, it was quite simple that everyone knew that 6 of the distilleries made peated whiskey and 2 of them did not, and that was Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain. I say 8 distilleries, but we're ignoring Port Ellen. It had closed by 1983. And so you grew up with this, or grew up, what am I saying? You came into the industry and you followed the whiskey scene, knowing that there were these 2 distilleries that made unpeated whiskey, which was very atypical for the Islay style. They were the black sheep. And Bunnahabhain used to be a peated whiskey, and it veered away from that in 1962 or 63. The record's a bit funny on that one. So from the 60s onwards, it was an unpeated whiskey. And obviously, when you've come from Islay and you're making unpeated whiskey, you've got to be making good stuff. And I'll talk about the history in a moment. But what was fascinating was the owners in the 1990s decided to do some experimental runs of peated whiskey. Now, let's just go back a bit and talk some history. So the distillery was founded in 1881. Now, I say founded, that's when they established the site and decided to build the distillery there. Didn't actually open until 2 years later in 1883. But 1881, coincidentally, was the same year that Bruichladdich was established as well. So same era, same period of time. And it eventually merged in 1887 with the Glenrothes distillery to form what would go on to become a mob called, it was joined with Baxter and Robinson, which became Highland Distillers. And over the years, Highland Distillers acquired quite a number of very famous, well-known distilleries, Highland Park and Macallan being 2 of them, Tamdhu, eventually Glenturret as well. And part of that brand also was the blend Famous Grouse. So a good chunk of Bunnahabhain that was in that portfolio would go to the Famous Grouse blend. And it was unpeated whiskey. And Famous Grouse decided in the 1990s, do you know what? It's costing us a fair bit to buy a peated whiskey in from companies that are outside our group. So why don't we try and make it in peated whiskey under our own roof? So in 1994, Bunnahabhain was charged with the task of making peated whiskey, which it hadn't done for a while. And it was an experimental run. They did it for 1 month. And they weren't that pleased with the results, but thought, we've got to let it mature for a few years and we'll see how we go. And then that was 1994. And then in 1997, they had another crack 3 years later and did another batch again. And they eventually decided, would you believe, they didn't feel that the peated whiskey they were making was a success. They weren't happy with it. And they sold off the casks. So in the early 2000s, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society was able to acquire quite a number of those peated casks of Bunnahabhain. Now, these were unheard of at the time. Remember, the market only knew this product. And so all of a sudden the society came along in the 2000s with peated Bunnahabhain. And it was a game changer. No one had ever tasted, or no one for 40, 50 years had tasted peated Bunnahabhain. And so the society brought this out. And some of you may have seen, I've been posting a bit on Instagram and on our Facebook group this as well. So this was one of those experimental whiskies from Bunnahabhain that was peated, and it was a beautiful, beautiful drop. And when the society brought this into Australia, this one came in 2008, absolutely took our membership by storm. It was a big, big, big hit at all the tastings we featured it at, and was absolutely wonderful. But then it all disappeared again because it was an experimental batch. It ran out, and Highland distillers weren't interested in making peated Bunnahabhain anymore. But Highland distillers sold the distillery in 2003 to Burn Stewart, and it wasn't long until Burn Stewart started to make peated Bunnahabhain. And so those distillation runs turned into what we know today as some of the peated bunny that you can buy. I'm going to call it bunny, that you can buy at your local bottle shop, and that includes the things like the Moynia, Bunnahabhain Moynia, and the Tochak. Now, interestingly, in my job as Cellarmaster, when I get the opportunity to select which casks we're going to bring into Australia, I'll be sent the list of what the society is going to be bottling, and I'll see Bunnahabhain, Distillery 10. And sometimes it'll actually say Bunnahabhain, and sometimes it'll say Bunnahabhain Moynia. And that's the clue that it's a peated bunny, the Moynia. And what that's actually Gaelic for peat. And so as a result, we have some wonderful peated Bunnahabhains these days coming through the society. And we're going to talk about one of those in a moment because it's that peated cask. Let me just see what's coming in with some comments here. James, good to see you. Mr. Finnegan. Hayden, yeah, Distillery 10. Sorry, I did say it. Popped out. Nicholas, yeah, you've got that correct, mate. Well done. So there you go, bit of history for you. Early 2000s bottling. I've got a camera in a strange place and it's reversed on me, by the way, so that's why I keep mucking up how I do these. And the society one there as well. So there's just a bit of background. Now, Bunnahabhain today, about 25% of their spirit goes off to the blender still. Sorry, I'll say that the way around. 25% is their single malt market, 75% goes to the blenders. And they still do a peated campaign for a short period each year. And that changes. Some years it might only be 2 weeks. 2 weeks in the year they'll make peated spirit. And at other times it might be more than that, depending on the season and how we go. So that's a bit of background on a distillery that I like. Now, I don't know if you've been to Bunnahabhain. It's, when you get there, it's probably one of the more, well, until very recently, one of the more run-down distilleries. Always very very drab, hadn't had a facelift in about 20 years. And the new owners who acquired the distillery in, I think, 2017 or 18, might have been earlier, announced just last year they were going to spend, I think I saw £11 million doing it up. So it's now getting a facelift and they're building a new visitor centre. And it really is a wonderful distillery to go to. When you go to the distilleries on Islay, one thing you'll notice is that Bunnahabhain stills look almost exactly the same as Lagavulins. They're just a bit larger. And those larger stills contribute to the sweetness that we get in Bunnahabhain. It's always a sweet whiskey. So it's a distillery that has some fans. And so no surprise then that it was selected for not one, but 2 festival casks when the society did its Spatiela ones, which is about what we're going to talk to in a moment. Just seeing if there's any other comments coming through. Please do send any questions if you've got them. I do welcome them. And you just have to bear with me while I click and switch between screens to check all that out. Do forgive me. It's high-tech stuff here. Alrighty, so I have here 2 whiskies that come from Distillery 10, and which you now know a little bit about. And this is a wonderful, wonderful bottling from an Oloroso sherry butt. I'm assuming Oloroso. We know that it's refill sherry. So this is in your Outturn. Check it out. and 14 years old at 62.5%. So it's got some alcohol. So I've got two here to try. One of them is peated, which we just talked about. This is the unpeated one. And of course, if you're going to do two whiskies and one's peated and one's not, leave the peated one till last. So Bunnahabhain has a reputation for being a wonderful spirit in sherry casks. And that's exactly what this is. So 14 years old in sherry, second fill or refill sherry. So we're not expecting a huge whack. And, oh, what a lovely sound. We're going to give this a crack just now. And straight away, you can't see it yet, I'll hold it up in a moment. Straight away, I'm noticing some really rich, lovely colour. That is reasonably dark, I think you would agree. So how do we approach a sherried Islay whiskey that's unpeated? Same way we would any other whiskey. Enjoy the colour, and that's dark enough to suggest there's some sherry wood influence. Have a nose of that. And that is lovely. I'm getting those typical sherry notes, but they're so balanced. It's not domineering, it's not overwhelming, probably because it's a refill and not first fill. And it's got that saltiness. Another amazing feature of this distillery is the fact that it just has this salty tang that comes out in the maritime nature of it. Wonderful drop. Now at an ABV of 62.5%, that's reasonably high. And what we're seeing now, there's obviously a trend. I think must have been 8, 9, 10 years ago, in some cases even more. Distillers worked out that it was costing them a lot of money to mature water in their casks. And so a lot of distilleries in the last 10 years or more have started to fill their casks at higher strength. For many, many years, the industry standard was 63.5%. And that was chosen so that companies could trade casks with one another without having to swap duty and excise on it. But that meant having to add water and water the whiskey down to fill it at 63.5%. And as I say, with casks becoming so expensive and sherry casks becoming so rare, it was more common now just to fill the casks at spirit strength rather than filling strength. So at 62.5%, there's a little bit of alcohol there, but you really, really don't get a sense of it. It's not particularly spirity. It is wonderful. Just reading a comment from Hayden here. Great memories of sitting in the freezing cold warehouse there, drinking whiskey from the cask. Love that they have such a broad range of whiskies. I'll tell you what, the range is incredible. If you go to Bunnahabhain's website and look at the range of bottlings and release they have at the moment, it is massive. We see just a tiny fraction of them here in Australia at our commercial bottle shops, but it is an impressive range. And that is just a glorious drop. This is one of the great tragedies of an online tasting. I'm enjoying this, and you've just got to watch me sniff and taste and take my word for it, but that is just glorious. If you're a fan of sherry whiskies, this is amazing. If you're a fan of this distillery, this is amazing. And I haven't even tasted it yet. This is all just on the nose. Oh, that is glorious. That is glorious. This is a promotional bottle that we've opened for the purposes of tonight and for drawing some samples off. I think I may just have to acquire this for myself. It's a beautiful drop on the finish. It goes on and on and on. Mr. Finnegan asks, I'm looking at my 12-year-old Bunnahabhain. How do I know the year it was distilled? Is there a code somewhere on the bottle? Yes, there is. I don't know if your bottle looks like this, James. But if you search, you may be able to find a laser code, and there you go. I've just found mine. You've got to hold it up in the light, and then you have to work out how to interpret them. And every company has a different system for their code. What I'd suggest you do, find out the code number, flick it through to us, and we can ask some questions, because there's a couple of groups you can post that information on, and some people in the industry know exactly what the company's code is, as they've all got different numbering system. Sometimes the number indicates, the first numbers indicate the year that it was distilled. It can be the batch where it was bottled, the batch that it got sent out, the market that it got sent to. So you can't just sort of look at 05, 1289 and assume it was bottled in 2005. That's not the case. But James, we may be able to help you with that. The other clue you can always do, of course, is just look at the label, and that'll give you an idea of the period or era, because you can tell when they've changed their branding and their livery, what their when a whiskey came from a certain era. What's a little disappointing for me is I'm looking at the group here, and I can see there's 15 comments, and it's only displaying the bottom 4. So I hope I'm not missing comments as they go by. Even if I click on that. What a wonderful drop. As I said, if you're a fan of this distillery and you're a fan of sherry whiskies, this is a must. Now, here's the sad bit about any society bottling. It's a limited product. When you get the contents of a single cask, 489 bottles from this particular cask, and unfortunately, I think I'm right in saying only 24 available in Australia for a rare festival bottling. So to be honest, we were pretty chuffed to get 24, and I know that's not too many to go around our membership. But if you can get in and grab that one, good luck to you. Amazing price too, $230 for a special festival bottling of a sherry cask bunny. What an amazing price. How do we do it? I don't know. So that's 10.188 and new acquaintance, that's called. And surprise, surprise, it's from the deep, rich and dried fruits flavor profile. James, you've given me a code there, F225972. All right, mate, I don't know off the top of my head, but we will ask the question and try and get an answer for you. But if the label looks the same as mine, that label was in place till about 2007 or 8, I think, until it changed. So hopefully that gives you some sort of clue. If you can remember when you bought it, of course, that's another hint also. I'm looking for other comments here. What's going on? Okay, on the group, on the page, there's some questions. Robert Akers, good to see you, mate. Have you tried the Spice and Dry 1.218? Love to hear your notes. The answer is yes, it was delicious. I loved it. If you want more than that, very much in the style of what you expect for that type of cask from that particular distillery. Keenan asks, hi Andrew, I did see a Fascilla 2020 label for Distillery 3. As this didn't make the Aussie Outturn, do you know how many SMWS releases for Fascilla there are this year? I believe there were 2 others that we didn't get in Australia, and you're right, Distillery 3 was one of them, and I've got a feeling there was another one as well. Off the top of my head, I can't quite recall, but Keenan, you are right, yes, we just couldn't get them all. And you know, when you've got 19 branches around the world, we have to share them amongst the other branches as well. So some go to some markets, some go to others. So look, we didn't get that distillery number 3, but then there's a few markets and branches that didn't get distillery number 10 either. So it all comes out in the wash. I never get too upset when the Australian branch misses out on something, because I know that we've received casks that other branches haven't got as well. Mark, you are right. Yes, the colour does look fantastic. So there you go. That's what's going on there. Now, what a wonderful sherry drop. I'm repeating myself, I know, but I can't get over just how delicious this is. So let's move on to our next one. And this is from our heavily peated flavour profile range. So the distillery, when they sourced their malt, went for the really high phenols. Now, people talk about this all the time. What are the typical phenols for how to measure the smokiness and the peat in a whiskey? And it's the number of phenols in the malt in parts per million. And Ardbeg is typically the distillery that day in, day out produces the heaviest peated whiskey on Islay at 55 parts per million. Port Charlotte, which is distilled at Bruichladdich, is around 40 parts per million. And then, would you believe, Lagavulin, Laphroaig, and Caol Ila, all 3 of those peat their malt to 35 parts per million. So I know everyone thinks, oh, Lagavulin, Laphroaig, big peat monsters. They're actually a little bit down in the scale, but it's not all about the ppm. And if you want to know more about this, I have written a very extensive article about it, which is published on Whisky and Wisdom. So if you go to Whisky and Wisdom, and the name of the article was When Fixation on ppm Gets OTT, for over the top. Don't worry too much about it. As we know, Caol Ila and Lagavulin both peated to 35 parts per million, and yet Lagavulin comes across significantly smokier, because there's so much more you can do in how you ferment and how you distill, how you run your stills, basically. So don't get hung up too much on it. But we know that this particular Bunnahabhain went through at a very high ppm, and I believe the number was about 35 to 40, which is sort of Port Charlotte level as well. Now, this is much younger. It's only 6 years old, and it's also from a sherry butt. In this case, it's a second fill Oloroso butt. Now, this sherry butt had an outturn of 489 bottles. This sherry butt has an outturn of 616. Why the discrepancy? It's because of the age. This is 14 years old. This is 6 years old. The longer it spends in the cask, the more evaporation or angel shares takes place. So we lose spirit. So that's why young casks, young sherry butts in particular, have much higher outturns. So at 616, there was a bit more of this to go around. So let's have a crack at this. Second fill Oloroso sherry. We know that the sherry was Oloroso as opposed to Fino. You don't see a lot of Fino casks much anymore, or Amontillado. Certainly not Pedro Jimenez. And if I look at the color of that, again, that's a nice hue, nice copper hue, bordering on dark gold. I won't go so far as mahogany or jarrah. It's not that, but lovely all the same. So peated whiskey, let's have a try. I'll tell you what, sherried whiskies can be beautiful. Peated whiskies can also be beautiful. Sherry peated whiskies don't always work. Sherry and peat, it's a difficult marriage, and society, I'll start that sentence again. I've tried many peated sherry casks or sherry cask peated whiskies where that marriage did not work. It just was dissonant, didn't quite gel. It was a confused whiskey. I can tell on the nose straight away, that is a happy marriage. That is fused and gelled beautifully. Lovely drop. Zeno asks, hey AD, 2 questions. What dram did you use for the ribs? Have you tried the .1 yet? Yeah, some of you may have seen a post I put on social media today, which was for a bit of a giggle. I'm not at liberty to answer that, Zeno, but yeah, it was a funny moment. Tell you what, it's been an interesting week in the social media scene. I don't know how many of you are on the whisky Facebook groups here in Australia. A lot of discussions around the price of Australian whisky and excise and tax and all the rest of it. A few people got hot under the collar, which happens occasionally with these discussions. But look, it's interesting that we have, and I think it's great we have such a vibrant community that talks about these things and has the discussions. And that's really what I love. I love discussion. I love dialogue. I love conversation, and I love it when we get to talk about whiskey. When I first got into whiskey, there was no community. There was no social media. There was no Scotch Malt Whisky Society. You had to go a long way to find a kindred soul to talk about it all with. So yeah, I do love those dialogues. Wow. Take your time with a peated whiskey. It's so simple just to smell it and go, oh yeah, there's smoke, and then have a sip. If you dive beneath the smoke, beneath the peat, you'll find more that's going on there. And there's some complexities. Now, it's only 6 years old. Now, peated whiskey, does it mature faster? Why do we see peated whiskies bottled young? Does it mature faster? Not necessarily, but the reality is that peat can sometimes mask imperfections or volatiles that would be there in something else. So would we bottle a regular space cider from a sherry cask at 6 years old? It'd be a surprise for it to be ready that early because of the high phenols and the faints that come through in peated whiskey. Sometimes you can get away with it, and this one has. It doesn't smell immature to me. It doesn't. There's not huge amounts of oak. There's a little hint of sherry there, but it's working. Let's have a taste. Oh, hey, that is fascinating. That is really, really interesting. That's a real pea and ham soup kind of flavor profile. It's got the sweetness of the original spirit, the spirit from distillery number 10. The peat has taken it in a real bacon, maple syrup on bacon, pea and ham soup kind of direction. lovely creosote and charcoal and hot mix bitumen. If you've ever been walking along the pavement and you've seen the bitumen that they've just put down, it's still steaming. It's got that real bituminous creosote smell. There's a bit of that as well. Drew McKinney asks over here, the worst parallel import dram you ever had? Look, I can answer that, Drew. I'd probably get myself in a bit of trouble for identifying, because I think everyone would know where it came from and who the parallel importer was. But as a distillery I'm very familiar with and very well acquainted with, and this parallel import that we had from that distillery clearly got cooked out in the sun. It was a disaster, and that has happened repeatedly. I think you know what I'm talking about, mate. But good question. Please send your questions in. As I say, if you're able to send them in on the group, I can see them over here on the side. Tell me if you like sherry peated whiskey. Some people like the peat, some people like the sherry, some people don't like to mix them. Sometimes there are some people, there's a school of thought that says that sherry takes away from the peat smoky experience that they're looking for. And to be honest, if you like, I suppose, your flagship Islay distilleries, like your Ardbeg 10-year-old is filled into 100% American oak ex-bourbon casks. Lafroig 10-year-old, almost entirely American ex-bourbon barrels from Jim Beam, because Jim Beam and Lafroig are under the same ownership. Most of Lagavulin 16, the vast majority of the casks in that batting are ex-bourbon casks. So if you like those staple, those benchmarks, Islay drams, most of them are either 100% or very close to 100% American oak ex-bourbon barrels. And so if that's what you like and what you enjoy in peated whiskies from Islay, sherry may not be your thing. So let me know. Share your thoughts with us. Mark, you make a very good point here, mate. Same as brewing beer, hops hide a lot of imperfections, plenty to hide behind in an IPA. Very good point, and it's a great analogy. And I'll tell you what, there's some IPAs and pale ales at the moment that are just raised to the bottom with hops and using hops to disguise what's actually a pretty rough fermentation, in my opinion. Well, the conversation's taken a change here. Shane, it's good to see you, mate, and I do like your comment there. Darren's made a comment here about prices over here and going shopping in Japan. Well, yeah, look, Darren, your point is valid, but there's a bit that goes into that, and it's to do with different excise rates and shipping rates and all the things we know that contribute to the cost of whiskey in Australia. Wow. That is a lovely drop. I'm sorry, Matt. I don't think I'm going to return these 2 bottles to you. They they might be staying at my house. They are spectacular. So tomorrow, 12 noon is that it's Outturn Day, and we will be launching. Look, let's be honest. Some casks are going to be more popular than others. There's going to be a race for some of them. Please be patient with us. Believe me, we are hovering over it. We are watching it. If the site goes down or gets hung, we have 3 people ready to pounce and try and get things up again. One little tip I can give you is if you grab something and it's in your checkout, in your cart, check out straight away. Don't go back and build and build and build. If you need to do it in 2 or 3 iterations, let us know. We can take care of the shipping for you afterwards. But what's happened a lot is that members sort of add to their cart and they go and find another one and another one. And by the time they've collected their cart and gone, what they wanted was gone. Just because it's in your cart does not mean that you've reserved it. It's not till you actually activate it and pay that it comes off the list. So whilst it's sitting in your cart, other members can actually grab it. So bear that in mind as well, something you need to remember. Nick, you personally love peat and sherry. Generally, I find lower ppm like Highland Park works better with sherry. That's a good call. That is a really good call. Highland Park is a wonderful, wonderful distillery when they get it right with their sherry butts. When they get it right, you'll notice I said. That's very true. Talisker is another example. Peated Talisker. We've had some Ardmores, lightly peated Ardmores that were in from sherry casks from the Society. They were absolutely brilliant as well. Darren, on the Lafroig warehouse tasting, a 16-year-old a month later was amazing. When it works, it really works. And I think that's the point, isn't it? When it works, it works. And you can say that for all aspects of whiskey, can't you? I mean, there's that old saying, there's no such thing as bad whiskey, there's just good whiskey and better whiskey. But sometimes when things work, it just takes it to a next level, another plane. And those are the sublime whiskies that we remember. I still, to this day, remember some of the most sublime whiskey experiences I've had back in early 2000s, 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6. A lot of them were society bottlings and experiences. Those sublime moments when something just goes next level and it stays with you forever. And those are the casks and the bottlings that enter distillery and society folklore, and they become legendary things. Looking at some other comments over here. Lots of it coming through. I'm sorry I can't read more than there's a few that scroll off the scene. I apologize for that. So let me tell you, we have some fascinating stuff coming in. I know everyone's focused on this right now, and so they should. It's happening tomorrow. My issue, or not my issue, but one of the things you need to bear in mind in my line of work is that I'm always having to look 2, 3, 4 months beyond. Whilst you're celebrating and talking about this, I've actually got my eye on the next shipment and what the society is going to be bringing in about 3 months' time. The society, of course, is bottling further ahead than that. So what I choose for in May's selection process is actually going to be August's production, which we will see come in on a November or December shipment. So we're looking a long way ahead. And I can tell you now, there is some fantastic, beautiful stuff in the pipeline coming down the track. Also, some really interesting stuff from our SCS range, our single cask spirits. We've got some amazing American whiskies as well. If you like bourbon and rye whiskey in particular, we have some lovely surprises for you coming in. Some amazing stuff down the track, and also some amazing gins as well. So wonderful Scotch whiskies, but there's some more interesting stuff coming in the pipeline as well. If you've been hanging out for some of that to come in, there is more on the way. Nirmal asks, should we be worried that the society site seems to be down now? Is it? Is it really? I'm actually just opening that now to check, mate. And my internet's slow because I'm using up all my bandwidth doing this at the moment. That is taking a while to load. Should you be worried? No, you shouldn't. I'm sure this is a temporary thing. And to be honest, we're probably uploading and getting everything ready for tomorrow. We do that the night before and get things ready. So I suspect that's the reason. No, don't be too worried about that. Joel asks the question, next American malt, Andrew. Yeah, there is an American malt on the way. I can vouch for that. I've personally selected, and I think what did I order? 30 or 36 bottles of an American malt. Not an American rye, not an American bourbon, an American malt. There is one on the way. Joel, so keep your eye out for that. That'll be a ripper. Nick asked the question, which bottle do you think will sell out first tomorrow? I don't know. It's hard to answer that, isn't it? Who knows if everyone who likes one particular cask is going to be there on the dot at 12 noon. I don't know, mate. Look, to be honest, everyone's focused on the festival bottlings. The malt of the month is a ripper. It would not surprise me if the malt of the month was the first one to go. It is such a fantastic drop. Exuberant bounty of fruit, 13 years old. Lovely drop. Dan Roberts, you've asked the question, any distillery 14s coming to Australia soon? 14s, no. Haven't seen a 14 in the production line down the track. Haven't seen one for a while, in fact. They do exist, don't worry, they're out there. The company that owns Distillery 14, we are having some wonderful conversations with them. The trouble is they're such a large company, dealing with one cask or two casks is something that doesn't quite even fit into their system. I had the conversation with one of their stock managers the other day. I'm sorry, it was a year or two ago. Forgive the turn of phrase. And I said, look, we would love to be able to get a cask or two from you. And he said, my system doesn't deal in single casks. We move parcels of 30, 40, 50 at a time to our own blenders and to the major companies. So it just takes a while to get to the right level where we can acquire either a small parcel of casks, the society might buy 4 to 6 at a time, or a larger parcel, and then we've got to trade with other companies because obviously the organisation that we just obviously can't take on 20, 30 parcels from one distillery at a time. So there's a bit of horse trading going on in the background there. Happy to talk about that some other time if you like. That's probably a discussion and topic all for itself. John has just realised that the Whiskey and Element testing pack actually sent him these 2 10s that I've just tried. So there you go. Someone else out there is drinking the same as me. What a nose on the 190. You are absolutely spot on, aren't you? The 190 is our peated one, 10.190, called Make Moynia a Devil. Now, isn't that a great? I mentioned earlier that Moynia was Gaelic for peat. And so the play on words there, make mine a devil, make Moynia a devil. So they've done well there. I know Matt was talking the other day about the names they come up with and our tasting panel, how they come up with it all. Really depends on who's the chairman and who's taking notes, but some chairmen get a bit more poetic than others, let's just put it that way. Month of next bourbon or rye, while we're at it. The month of the next bourbon or rye. Joel hasn't even left Scotland yet, mate, so it's got to spend a few months on the water, so don't expect it any time in the next couple of months. Joel says, Matt is so secretive with these things. Well, look, I don't know, have a few drams, I'll share anything with you. Just ask the questions. It is hard in these live streams knowing what to share and what not to share. What can I say? Most of the time when I'm on these things, I'm alongside Matt and we bounce off one another. So it's a bit of fun doing that way as well. So folks, that's about all I had to go through tonight. Talked about these 2 festival bottlings. If you've not read the articles in this yet, check them out. It is such a shame we can't do events at the moment. We're trying to do that with some more online events that we're planning in the future. We intend to do more. Matt, I can tell you now, I saw him today, we caught up briefly. He has blisters and calluses on his fingers from all the sample bottles he's been putting together for our next online event, and he'll be telling more about that. But we do look forward to getting Spirit out to you and having online tastings and being able to do online and digitally what we would otherwise love to do in a venue at the moment. But look, we're in interesting times. He's hoping that we get the chance to congregate together again before too long, enjoy each other's company and enjoy some drams together. Drew, I'm glad you liked the Facebook joke. I think that I'll be remember that one for a while. So look, it has been a pleasure drinking with you. Good luck tomorrow in your quest on Outturn. Matt will be back on tomorrow night, and I look forward to your company at some point in the future again. It has been an absolute blast. Pleasure drinking with you. All the very best, and look forward to your company next time. For now, Slanjava.